and welcome to the Murder, She Wrote Rewatch podcast. Today, we're taking a look at Death Takes a Curtain Call, the wonderful and interesting little episode. As always, we're going to start off by poking around at the the actors and actresses who play the significant roles in this episode, and then we'll delve into what actually happens in the episode. So, who do we have? Well, we've got a few people. First off, we're going to start with good old Claude Akins, Captain Ethan Cragg. We've seen him before in a few episodes. He's back reprising his role in this one. We also have a Leo Peterson, played by actor Hurd Hatfield, who passed away in 1998, apparently. He is best known for The Picture of Dorian Gray, 1945 movie in which he played Dorian Gray himself. He played Pontius Pilate in the 1961 movie King of Kings. He played Arius in the 1961 movie El Cid. And he played Terence Huntley in the 1968 movie The Boston Strangler. Murder, She Wrote was one of the last things he did back between 1984 and 1989. The last movie he did was Lies of the Twins, a TV movie, in 1991. What else has he done? Knight Rider, he was in an episode of that. Kojak, The Lives of Benjamin Franklin. He was John Church in the TV miniseries. Interesting. The Wild Wild West. He was in 2 different episodes of that. The Night of the Undead and The Night of the Man-Eating House. No idea. I've not seen that show. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff he's been in that I haven't seen. However, he has been in 3 episodes of Murder, She Wrote. The Death Takes a Curtain Call, this one. He was in another episode in 1986 as a different character. And he was in another one in 1989 as a different character as well. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, The Picture of Dorian Gray, very, very interesting. So he plays Leo Peterson. He plays a friend of Jessica who lives in Cabot Cove, who has invited her along with him to see the Russian ballet in Boston. We have, who else was it? Skip Fleming is the character's name. We see him quite early on, played by James Carroll Jordan. And he's still acting, still alive. Oh, interesting. Apparently he was born in Japan, but raised in England. Very versatile, London-based North American voiceover artist with gravitas and brio. With a range from New York mobster, California cool to Texas cowboy. He's also a highly successful narrator of many documentaries for the History and Discovery Channel. Okay, he is known for playing Billy Abbott in Rich Man, Poor Man, Book 2, apparently. Steve Olson, number 2, in Days of Our Lives. Slash Dance. He played Logan in Slash Dance. And he apparently played actor in the 1999 movie called Driver. What else has he been in here? Lots of TV stuff. TV miniseries, TV, all the way up to like 2016. Homefront: The Revolution, he was a voice in that game. Where's the, oh, he was Mr. Murray in the 10th Kingdom TV miniseries, which I have. Very interesting. It's been a while since I've seen it. Murder, She Wrote, here we go. He has been in 4 episodes of Murder, She Wrote, playing a different character every time. One in 1984, one in 1987, one in 1988, and one in 1990. And he's been in a few things. The New Mike Hammer, Romance Theater. Don't know what that's about. Rich Man, Poor Man, Book 2. Lincoln, the TV miniseries, as Robert Lincoln, which I believe is Abraham Lincoln's son. Yeah, not bad. Not bad at all. He's got a minor role in this one. I'll get back to Mr. Fleming here in a minute. We also have, there we go, Sergei Berensky. Sergei Berensky is an actor. He plays one of the KGB men. He's still acting today. He's got some stuff in pre-production. Post-production still not coming out. He's done a lot of TV stuff. Wasteland 2, The Hunted, the AOF channel. Don't know what those are. He's done video games. Might and Magic Heroes, 6, Bulletstorm, General Serrano, Red Dead Redemption, Marshall Leigh Johnson. And the same for the DLC and whatnot. What else has he been in? The Adventures of Shirley Holmes TV series. I didn't even know that was a thing, but it's apparently out in 1998. Huh. Highlander TV series. He played 2 different characters in that. Star Trek Voyager. First Maj, M-A-J-E, Cullah. First Maj Cullah, I think it is. He was in 5 episodes as that character. Not bad. Some other Star Trek stuff, video games. And MacGyver, he played Major Nikolai Kozov and Piedra. Where is the Murder, She Wrote? Dukes of Hazzard. He played a couple characters in that. He was only in the 1 episode of Murder, She Wrote. He is the fellow that gets killed in this episode. Mr. Sergei. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Who else do we have? Yes. There is Dane Clark. He plays FBI agent O'Farrell because naturally the Russians are involved, the KGB and whatnot, so the FBI is going to be around. Dane Clark passed away in 1998. His last film credits were back in in Murder, She Wrote. That was his last film. He played FBI agent O'Farrell in 1984, and in 1989 there was an episode. He passed away September 1998 in Santa Monica, and I believe that episode of the episode of Murder, She Wrote that aired in, when was it? We're looking, that's in season 6. Doesn't say on here when it aired, but it probably aired early in 1989. Yeah, more than likely that's what happened. So it was already filmed and whatnot when he passed away, and it just aired naturally in the right order. Okay, poor fella. Always sad to see to hear about actors passing away. All right, where were we? We also have the Russian Major Anatol Karzov, played by William Conrad, who also passed away back in 1994. But William Conrad is a rather big name. He's been in a few things. He is most known for playing Frank Cannon in the I believe the TV series Cannon. I'm looking for that now. Yes, the TV series Cannon, which ran for 5 years. He played Jason Lochinvar. Yeah, Jason Lochinvar, otherwise known as the Fat Man in Jake and the Fat Man. And then there was a couple of that was in 1987 to 1992, and then there was a couple of movies back in 46 and 47 that he was in that I don't know. One called The Killers and one called Body and Soul. I remember him mostly from Jake and the Fat Man myself. Huh. Because he was in 103 episodes of that. Jason Lochinvar, Fat Man McCabe. So Jason McCabe is the Fat Man. He played a DA in Matlock. He played Art Patterson in the Hotel TV series. He was only in the one episode of Murder She Wrote, but he was the narrator for all seven episodes, I should say, of Manimal. He was Nero Wolfe in the TV series Nero Wolfe. He was the narrator of Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. He was the narrator of How the West Was Won, the narrator of Tales of the Unexpected. He had that deep voice that was really good for narration. He was the narrator of the Fugitive TV series way back in the day. So yeah, he's done a lot of narration work for it, for TV and whatnot, which is really kind of cool. And he's an amazing actor. I always liked him in Jake and the Fat Man, and I really liked him in this episode too, which we will get to shortly. We also have a couple of other actors. We've got the character of Alexander Mazarov, played by George de la Pena, who is oh, he hasn't done a lot. He's only got 20 acting credits to his name. He's known for Mighty Aphrodite, Greek Chorus, 1995. He's known as Robert Volaire in Brain Donors, 1992. Max Delano in One Last Dance, 2003. And Vaslav Nijinsky in Nijinsky, 1980. He played Mikhail Olinskov in 3 episodes of L.A. Law, and Lieutenant Orville Solis in Star Trek The Next Generation, The Arsenal of Freedom, if anyone's familiar with that. And he was only in the one episode of Murder, She Wrote. There's a couple others. But yeah, not a lot. Not a lot. He's one of the ballet dancers, one of the main ballet dancers. There's another lady who is, I believe, Natalia Mazarov. she has even less. Wow, she's only got 6 acting credits. And her last one was in Murder, She Wrote in 1984, this episode. Deadly Lessons TV movie, The Competition, Fantasy Island, she was in one episode of that. Rich Man, Poor Man Book 2, she was in one episode of that. And Miles to Go Before I Sleep TV movie. Those are her only acting credits. Wow. That is crazy. But that's it. There's those two that are the main guy and the main girl in the ballet. Um, who else is there? There's one more person. Irina Katza. She's another one of the ballet dancers, played by Carrie Armstrong. And Carrie Armstrong, she's got a few. She's still acting today. She's got something coming out. It's in post-production for 2017. She is most known for Sonia in Lantana, Lynn Warner in Prisoner Cell Block H. Prisoner Cell Block H. Oh dear. Oh dear. Ho, ho. Okay, I thought this was a movie, but no, this is a television series. The lives of women behind bars in a female prison. And apparently, Australian series has, after 692 episodes, received cult status all over the world. Wow. Wow, that is an insane amount. So she's in that. That's something. She's Lynn Warner in that. 1979 to 1985. 6 years on that one. She plays Heather Jelly in Sea Change. 1998 to 2000. Dr. Luella Davis in MDA. 2002 to 2003. That's what she's known for. What else has she done other than those ones? Those seem to be her big ones. Halfway Across the Galaxy and Turn Left. Officer JD. Huh. Very interesting. A lot of this stuff seems to be from Australia that she's in, which is cool. I've seen very, very little of Australian TV, but what I have seen has been pretty neat. Yeah, she was only in the one episode of Murder, She Wrote. And then a lot of other stuff from, like, down in Australia, I think. Carrie Armstrong as Irina Katza. Those are our major players. Oh, wait, no, there's one more. Uh, I believe it is... Was it him? Or was it him? Let me just have a look-see. Huh. All right, give me just a second here. I need to check something, and I'll get right back to you. Yes, okay. So I have found it. Um, it is Palmer Eddington is another guy that is involved. There was like two names here, and I'm like, which one is it? It is Palmer Eddington. Palmer Eddington is played by Paul Rudd. And Paul Rudd is, he passed away in 2010, and he's only got 13 acting credits to his name. He hasn't been in a lot of stuff. He is known for Leon Kendrick in Buella Land, Lauren Hardman Jr. in The Betsy, Gary Aronson in The Last Song, and Reverend Lawrence Perkins in Kung Fu the Movie with David Carradine. He was only in the one episode of Murder, She Wrote, but he was in Quincy M.E. For an episode, Heart to Heart for a couple episodes, Knots Landing for 3 episodes, and Beacon Hill for 11 episodes. So yeah, he was in a few TVs, movies, and TV series and whatnot. But he plays Palmer Eddington. He's got a minor role in this one. I just wanted to be sure which one that we had. So those are our players. We also have, of course, Tom Bosley. Good old Sheriff Tupper is back in this one because part of it happens in Cabot Cove. Oh yes, and we also have Velma Roediger, played by Jessica Nelson. I almost forgot about her. Jessica Nelson, 21. She has 21 credits to her acting name. One in 2010. She doesn't seem to be in a lot of stuff. She was in the one episode of Murder, She Wrote, this one. Archie Bunker's Place as Marsha for 4 episodes. What else? She was a young lady in WKRP in Cincinnati. The White Shadow, American Flyers. She was in College Humor Originals. She was the narrator for the Independence Day extended scene. I haven't seen that. Wait a minute, hold on. Who is she who I think she is? Is it in here? No. But apparently, she plays Monica, whoever that is. It's been so long since I've seen it, but she plays Monica in He-Man and the Masters of the Universe movie. He-Man and Skeletor, Masters of the Universe, that live-action movie with Dolph Lundgren. Yeah, she plays Monica in that movie. I don't know who Monica is. It's been so long since I've seen it. I thought maybe Monica was like the main girl, so I had to check, but no, the main girl was named Julie Winston. Not Monica, so definitely not her. But those are our players. All right, now that we've done that, now we can get on to what actually happens in the episode. And normally the episode starts with like a slow pan on something, and we see the name of the episode, but something's different in this one. We don't see the name of the episode right away. First things first, we hear a TV being played, or the sound of like a radio being played and whatnot, and we see Jessica, because it goes into her house, and Jessica's cutting a piece of pie for Ethan Cragg, who's visiting over and wanting to have some pie because he likes his pie. When the events that are playing on the news that we heard catch Jessica's attention, and she kind of wanders away from the pie to watch the news, while Ethan's like looking back and forth between her and the pie, going, the pie. What's on the news is that there is a Russian ballet visiting Boston, and there are anti-communist protesters, one of whom is played by Miss Jessica Nelson there, Velma Roediger. She's this very, very loud, brash lady in a green jacket with a green hat, very standoutish. You can't miss her in this one. Meanwhile, uh, Ethan is basically going, why are you having to go to Boston anyways to see these people? And of course, Jessica's like, because Leo Peterson was kind enough to get me tickets to it. So it's going to, the least she can do is go and share. The next thing we see is Jessica coming into the theater, opera house, what have you, with an older man who walks with a limp uh, on her arm. Uh, they walk up through the line the um, to the ticket counter where they have to stop to give their tickets and whatnot to be admitted. And that's when the older man with Jessica happens to see another older fellow who you see his pleasant expression kind of melt away at the sight of this other man. And Jessica notices this and looks over. And the older man's fairly larger fellow, and is a fairly larger fellow with a beard and a hat that he's wearing, and he tips his hat to Jessica and the other guy. And this other fellow is William Conrad. He's the major, Anatole Karzov, who we find out. They continue up the steps to where they get the playbill from Mr. Palmer Eddington, who's standing there. And there's a little bit of a discussion between the two of them. Jessica, however, notices that she gets a playbill handed to her from the top of the pile that he's holding, whereas the one she's with, Mr. Peterson, gets handed a playbill from the bottom of the pile. And there's a definite focus on that. So I'm like, oh, there's a clue. There's a clue. That's the thing you'll notice watching Murder, She Wrote, that whenever the camera is focusing on something or showing that Jessica is noticing something, that's going to come into play later, more than likely. We end up going backstage at this point, and we see a guy in. He's basically in like an argyle vest over his shirt, and this fellow is none other than Skip Fleming. Mr. Fleming is an extremely sleazy man because you see him berating one of the stagehands that is Russian, making sure he knows what he's doing, and he walks over and calls one of the dancers aside and kind of flirts with her in an extremely sleazy and uncomfortable manner. Some of the words that he says are, I'm just like, oh God, no, oh, really, guy, what are you doing? Because he basically says, if you ever wanted to defect, you should just come and ask me. I'll show you a good time, blah, blah, blah. And things are getting a little heated. She's getting uncomfortable. The Russian dancer lady is Irina. And she's getting uncomfortable. And before anything can go too far, Sergei comes over and grabs a hold of him, pulls him off of her, and basically tells Mr. Fleming that you have to stop. You can't do that. You need to stay away from her. None of the ladies want you. Then we see Irina heading backstage to where the two Russian dancers are, the two main ones. A dark-haired fellow, all dressed up in red. He's got a little bit of eye makeup on and whatnot because it's the ballet, it's the theater. Now, one thing to note is that while Irina can speak English, if with an accent, and Natalia, the other girl, can speak English, if with an accent, Um, the the man, the Russian man there, he seems to only be able to speak Russian. Where is it here? Natalia Mazarov and Alexander Mazarov. Alexander only seems to be able to speak Russian because Irina comes into the dressing room, talks with Natalia, and basically is hoping that, because the world has loved seeing her, that America will love seeing her as well. There's this wonderful little moment. There's also a little bit of a look that passes between Alexander and Natalia after Irina leaves. Kind of wondered about that. Next thing we see, Jessica and her friend sitting in the audience um, as Leo is looking around. He's, of course, looking at his playbill, and there's a number 19 written in marker in the corner of a page. Jessica starts to ask about it just as the production is beginning, but Leo shushes her because the show's beginning. And then the ballet begins, and we see a lovely moment. We don't see a lot of the ballet. There's like bits and pieces, a little bit of a montage that happens while they're watching. We see cuts back and forth between the stage and Leo and Jessica in the audience as Leo's looking a little preoccupied. The next thing we see is a Mr. Fleming backstage, and Sergei kind of walks up behind him and delivers an ultimatum to him again that he needs to keep an eye on things. There's an altercation there, and Mr. Fleming is sleazy as ever. Sergei almost decks him, but when he's about to, the dancers come off stage and then go back out. Then we see Mr. Palmer Eddington heading down along the side and into the backstage. Mr. Peterson, Leo Peterson, Jessica's friend, sees him, as does Jessica. It cuts to the back where we see the wonderful young lady in green, Mr. Anti-Communist, banging on the door, the back door, yelling at the commies inside, wanting them, to face the truth. But the door's locked and she can't get in. She starts to stomp off when an unknown man, we see a hand kind of opening a window and propping it open. Then we see Palmer Eddington come back out of a room backstage and see Sergei off in the distance. They make eye contact. Sergei's holding a handkerchief to his cheek, and then they part ways. At that point, when at a certain point in the theater, in the middle of the production, Leo excuses himself and gets up and leaves. There's wonderful dancing, music, a finale that happens, and then the dancers come out for their encore, their stage. Now we see the major looking at the stage, and he pulls out a walkie-talkie and orders Sergei to go and go to the dressing room and find Alexander and Natalia because they're not on stage. At this point, just when things are about to get interesting, because we think, oh no, we're about to see a murder. Nope. At this point, the wonderful young lady in green, the Velma Rodecker, comes running on stage, ranting and raving about not being deceived by the communists, that this entertainment is only a ruse to get them into our country, blah, blah, blah. The police come and escort her off. The next thing we see is that Leo goes and practically pulls Jessica out of the audience, down the steps. Jessica wants to go to the car, and he's like, no, no, it's this way, even though Jessica seems to think it's a different way. We see Mr. William Conrad, the Major Anatole Karzov, looking at something, and Skip Fleming comes and wanders by after the Major and his subordinate leave, and there's a dead body on the ground. Leo ends up bringing Jessica to the car, and Jessica sees the face of the driver, and it's Alexander Mazarov. And Natalia Mazarov is in the car as well. They get in the car and they speed off before the KGB can lock everything down, because that's what Major Karzov was going to do. Then we find out that Natalia is Leo's niece. Leo used to be a Russian ballet dancer back in the day, and he's helping Natalia and Alexander escape and defect. So they're planning on going to the embassy to seek asylum. However, Jessica is she doesn't seem completely upset about Leo having involved her in a potential crime. She kind of understands why they're doing this, but she suggests turning on the radio to find out any information. And they do that and find out that there's been a murder. Sergei has been killed, and they're the prime suspects in this murder. However, according to them, they never saw Sergei. They didn't go to their dressing room. They went to the musician's room, where they had the change of clothes stashed for them. That's what Leo was doing, stashing the clothes and bringing the car around. That's why he left Jessica there. So Jessica says, I'm going to stick around here, see what I can find out. Leo, you take them back to Cabot Cove. I'll call up Ethan, Mr. Cragg, and get him to help hide them. We then go back to the opera house, where we see Mr. Fleming being questioned by FBI agent O'Farrell and the Major, and he doesn't seem to know one way or the other, Mr. Fleming, about what's going on. He's like, yeah, I didn't kill the guy. Jessica comes and pokes her nose in, of course, and Mr. O'Farrell wants nothing to do with her. Absolutely nothing to do with her. He can't have civilians poking around. Jessica ends up saying, she's a writer. She writes mysteries. And, she might be able to help. Of course, the Major Karzov makes mention of there being a writer from this area, from Maine, a J.B. Fletcher, that he's quite impressed with her writings. And of course she thanks him, and that makes him go, oh, it is you are the writer. And he kind of tells the FBI agent, he's like, she has remarkable powers of observation and deduction. We could use her. And he's like, please, I insist. He seems to almost pull rank on the FBI agent, but tempers his tone a little bit. And Mr. FBI agent kind of was like, all right, do what you want, Karzov. And stomps off. So then Karzov goes and escorts Jessica to the dressing room, where they have a bit of a discussion. Karzov lays out his theory of what happened, and Jessica ends up offering a completely different plausible scenario, that it wasn't Alexander Marzov, but it was the Major who had his own man killed, in order to use the murder as a way of ensuring that the two suspects in the murder, two of his people that were planning on defecting, couldn't. because there's a murder investigation. This sort of thing would hamper such a process. And he, instead of being upset, he seems quite amused by it because it's not true. But he's like, it is an absolutely, plausible scenario. He applauds her for this. There's some nice little byplay between these two for over the whole episode. Um, like two brilliant minds, kind of recognizing each other's potential and each other's brilliance. So I really enjoyed that, and he seems quite good natured for a Russian KGB major. Uh, Next thing we see is Ethan in Cabot Cove and Jessica talking to him from the hotel, and he's all upset because he could get in trouble harboring some communists. But she manages to get him to agree. Uh, Somebody's pounding on her door at that point. Jessica stops on the way to the door to turn up the volume on the TV and see some videotape of the closing moments before Miss Rodecker came on stage and caused a big fuss. And she kind of looks thoughtful at this TV, showing the 5 female dancers and 3 male dancers in front of them, and so on. When she finally opens the door, it's to find the major there, pounding on it. And he apologizes for pounding so much because he's like, back home where he's from, not a lot of people answer the doorbell, so he's used to pounding. It's a force of habit. They end up going to the police station and looking at the personal effects and getting the autopsy report and whatnot. And Jessica is, of course, she finds a bit of a problem with the fact that the handkerchief was tucked inside Sergei's pocket with blood on it, because according to her, that kind of makes it a problem with the events that happened, the way the FBI agent is thinking, because what would he have done? The scratches came from the fight with Natalia, is what they were thinking, and then he was stabbed in the back by Alexander. That's the plot. That's what the major was thinking. But as Jessica points out, if that were the case, did he then tuck the handkerchief back in his pocket after he was stabbed in the back? No, those scratches had to have come from before. And then the FBI agent finds his watch that has some green fibers in it. And they still have Miss Rodecker upstairs, and her jacket is very garishly green. So they go to question her. Jessica and the major go back to the hotel where they're both staying at. The major offers her a nightcap, but she's like, no, I'm going to go and get some sleep. And alone in the elevator, she goes to press the 19th floor, then pauses and goes down and presses the main floor and leaves. She ends up visiting Mr. Palmer Eddington, making a comment upon seeing a picture of a young ballet man that Leo Peterson was a very fine young man in his day. And Palmer, of course, is wondering what all Leo told her about him. And she's like, oh, nothing. I figured it out on my own. That Mr. Eddington, was helping Leo in this. She finds out from Leo that all he had to do was, let him know which locker number was open. That was the number 19 on the playbill that he was given, so that he could stash their clothes and go into that room and leave the window open so Leo could get up there. That was his entire involvement in it, nothing more. And he really doesn't want to be involved in the troubles and whatnot, because the Russians could cause a lot of trouble for him, and he doesn't really want that. So they have a little bit of a discussion there over that. Um, she goes to leave. Oh yes, I almost forgot. He does remember because he saw Mr. Sergey holding a handkerchief to his cheek, and he lets Jessica know this, that he saw the man before he was murdered holding a handkerchief to his cheek, but he couldn't see why. It was because of the scratches, so they came before the murder. Um, Jessica goes to leave, and he's like, "Can I drive you home?" She's like, "No, no, I'll be fine." He's like, "Are you sure? You know, a lady shouldn't be walking the streets of Boston alone." She's like, "Oh, don't worry, I can take care of myself." We see her walking along the streets of Boston, and we see a man's feet following her. Uh, she hears that and steps up, goes a little faster, and then the man following her, we see his feet slowing down. Then we see her feet stepping off of a curb, and a car pulls up, and the major gets out and basically dismisses the man. She, of course, thanks the major for having a bodyguard follow her to make sure she was safe. And she, of course, knew he was there the entire time because she's Jessica Fletcher. She's extremely observant, this one. Uh, Next thing we see is Cabot Cove because the major ended up informing Jessica that uh, they pretty much have things wrapped up here. Miss Rodecker hasn't talked, but I mean, it's all but solved. It's not. We see Cabot Cove, Maine, and we see Sheriff Tupper approaching and talking to Alexander Mazarov. And he, of course, is trying to sound American. And the only words he ends up saying is either yup or nope. And the sheriff is kind of having this conversation with him. Ethan, of course, sees the sheriff and runs over and kind of, explains things. Oh, this is just a deckhand I've got to help me out since the fish are biting. He's like, how about I buy you a cup of coffee? Let's go. And Amos lets him know that there's apparently a couple of Russians on the run, and there's a warrant out for their arrest. And asks Ethan if he's seen anybody unusual in town. And he's like, I wouldn't know a Russian if I saw one. How about you, Sheriff? And he's like, oh, of course I am. Of course I would. He's like, I'd know a Russian from a country mile away. Which is amusing because he just talked to one and has absolutely no idea of it. Of course, then he sees Natalia also helping out and whatnot, and he thinks she's real pretty, but doesn't think anything else of it. Good old Sheriff Tupper. Then we see Jessica having some dinner, a little bit of a breakfast, I should say, with Major Karzov. Uh, they have some discussion about the case and whatnot. And she gets to talk to Irina a little bit. The major kind of calls her over because Jessica points out one of them looks rather sad. And she ends up talking with Irina a little bit, offering her condolences and whatnot. And then she catches the bus and heads home to Cabot Cove, where the sheriff is waiting for her because he always stops by and picks up the famous people in Cabot Cove. Then she goes and finds Ethan because from the sheriff she learned that Ethan has a new deckhand, and he's like, "Don't worry, don't worry." It's like I'm keeping them safe. They have a little bit of a dinner party with Leo and Ethan and Alexander and Natalia. Of course, there's a knock on the door just as they're about to sit down for dinner, and they go and hide them upstairs. They go and answer the door, and there is a young man there asking basically found out that Mr. Ethan Cragg was here and needed a seal on his boat. Of course, he doesn't have one, but he says, somebody else might have one. You could go and give them a call. So he asks to use Jessica's phone, and he goes and does so. Jessica takes him into the kitchen to use the phone to make a phone call, and he notices the dining table. This interloper dining table all set up, and asks about guests, and she's like, "Oh yes, they're a little bit late." And she asks him as he's just about to use the phone if he's from down east, and he of course says, "Oh no, ma'am, I'm from Maine." And then they go out and are watching the news again, and she sees the same video footage of the 5 dancers, female and the 3 male, and something in her mind is ticking over, it seems. Then the fellow comes out and leaves, goes on his way after making his phone call. Of course, the Leo Peterson and the 2 dancers come down, and of course, Jessica explains that he's not going for any seal. Of course, he wasn't who he said he was. This mysterious visitor who showed up, because as she explained to Ethan, she asked if he was from down east, and he said no, he was from Maine, and Ethan just smiles and laughs at that. Of course, Jessica explains that anyone from New England, down east, means Maine. So anyone from New England would know that. And the fact that he didn't means he wasn't from there. Of course, Jessica is about to make a phone call, talking to Letitia, a phone call to Boston, and has her put it on hold because someone's at the door. We see Sheriff Tupper and the Major. They have a warrant to search the premises for everybody. Sheriff goes in to check the kitchen and whatnot, and the Major comes in, and he seems a little more brusque maybe than before, a little more professional. Of course, they don't find anything. There's nothing to find, and they go on their way. Of course, the sheriff happens to have had a muffin first. We find out that Sergei did indeed get the scratches on his face from the protester lady, but she hid and saw Leo Peterson coming in with a viola case, stuffing some costumes into a locker before she went on stage. This is all being told via flashback by Major Karzov. Of course, the sheriff comes out having seemed to just eaten something, and Jessica asks if he enjoyed the muffin, and he's like, "Yes, yes, ma'am, it was good." Oh, Sheriff Tupper. Of course, nothing is found there, and of course, Jessica isn't being too helpful. But before they leave, Leo Peterson comes in and basically admits to killing him in order to keep the suspense, to keep everyone away. Jessica, of course, is saying it's not true. Of course he didn't, and the major knows it's not too. But they'll arrest him anyways, for now. They all leave with Mr. Peterson in tow, And Jessica heads back into the kitchen, uh, talking to Letitia, making a phone call to to Boston, where Skip Fleming picks up the phone and calls for Irina, who is out on the stage. We see a boat, and we see the wonderful man who visited the other night listening in on the conversation because he bugged her phone. But Jessica knows this. Uh, she ends up talking to Irina and saying something to her in Russian, a message from Alexander, and that Alexander and Natalia are going to be on Captain Craig's boat soon. Or wants to meet with her. I think it is, if I remember right. Wants to meet with Irina, and of course Irina seems to know what those words are. We see somebody trying to follow Jessica Fletcher, one of Karzov's men, as she goes for a jog. We see the sheriff trying to help Karzov find out where they are in Cabot Cove, and the sheriff is getting extremely, or not the sheriff, I should say, the major is getting rather annoyed with the sheriff. The man comes in that was following Jessica and says that he gave her the slip, and the sheriff finds this funny. He's like, "Oh, Miss Fletcher gave you the slip, did she? She's a wily one." There's a phone call for the major at the sheriff's office. And we see Mr. Fleming and Irina driving in the middle of the night somewhere. Uh, of course, Mr. Fleming is like, I don't even know what I'm doing here, man. I'm just helping you out. Pretty face and all that. And they come across J.B. Fletcher's post office box, her mailbox, outside her house. That's where Irina wanted to go. They go in and say hello to Jessica. She goes to make a phone call, and Mr. Fleming is like, "Well, why don't you use that phone?" And she's like, "Oh, well, that's because that phone's not bugged." She goes to the one that is bugged and sends a message that to Ethan to bring Alexander and Nikolai to his boat, thus sending the FBI off in that direction. Meanwhile, she's making some tea for Irina and Mr. Fleming, and that he probably shouldn't leave because the house is being watched right now by the Russians. There's a knock on the door, and Sheriff Tupper and Mr. Karzov show up again. And there is Irina. And Miss Fletcher goes and spins the tale of who killed Sergei. She tries to blame it on Mr. Fleming, basically saying he was jealous that Sergei was in love with her because he wanted her. Mr. Fleming wanted her. Of course, Miss Fletcher doesn't buy that at all, because she knows that Irina is the one who killed Sergei. And she lays it all out that he loved her, but Irina loved Alexander Mazarov. And Irina wanted to believe that Alexander loved her back, which is why when things happened and things went all south, she killed Sergei, knife in the back. And the reason why she noticed it was because of the video. showing the 5 female dancers and the 3 male dancers. She said the symmetry was off. There should have been 6 female dancers. So not only was Alexander and Natalia not there, but Irina wasn't on stage as well, and she should have been. When Sergei came in and saw Irina there in the dressing room, he of course thought she was behind it and was going to help in the escape. So she killed him. The sheriff ends up taking her away, arresting her. Mr. Fleming leaves as well. He's like, "Oh, I'll be going," and Jessica's like, "I was about to suggest the same thing." And it's left with Jessica and the Major, Mr. Karzov, and he doesn't seem too upset because he already suspects what Jessica tells him, that Irina and them were heading off to go and be in another, heading off to Portland to be in the thing, the U.S. Embassy. They have a nice little, a bit of a discussion. He actually ends up asking about the fishing here. And she says, "Why don't you stay for a few days?" And this was after she suggested to him that, maybe he would like to live in peace like Natalia and Alexander were going to. But he's a loyal member of the Communist Party, so he can't even entertain such a thought. But when she suggests, stay for a few days, he says that, and in a very wistful, almost sorrowful tone, that days have a way of turning into years. Because as much as he'd like to stay, he can't allow himself to. And he does kiss Jessica Fletcher on the hand, and credits roll. So it was a very interesting episode in that regard for what they do, especially between the Major and Jessica, their byplay and whatnot. I really enjoyed it. So that's it for this episode of the Murder, She Wrote Rewatch podcast. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, if you like what I'm doing, please give that like button a tap. Give that subscribe button a tap as well if you haven't already, so you can be kept apprised of when I do new videos. And throw a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you think of what I'm doing, of this episode, if you've seen it, if you're watching it with me. Throw those comments in the comment section. I'd love to get a discussion going with some people. Next episode of the Murder, She Wrote Rewatch podcast will be Death Casts a Spell. So join me then for more murder.